Coach, you talked a lot about this being the biggest moment of the season, the biggest game of the year, and it ends like this. Mm-hmm. How do you think your team responded to that moment, and why do you think they responded in that way?
That's $1 million question, right? When you're in this environment, when you're in the final, when you're in the, Sweet 16, and there's only possibility of 2 weekends left in the season, players, teams, people react different ways, and sometimes they get elevated and they do things, like I said, in there at a higher level than they did during the regular season. And sometimes they just get swallowed up by it and can't get out of it. And somebody like Lou, she rises to a whole nother level during, in a game like this. So you just don't know why. But it's funny because we were talking on the bench, in the locker room before the game. I said, after all these years that I'm doing this, I said, eventually there comes like a calmness, because it dawns on you how little control you have once the game starts over people's emotions. You can change. You can change a strategy. You can change what you want to do, but you can't change what's going on inside someone. And unfortunately, we picked the worst time for that to happen.
And speaking of Lou, we saw the emotions from Lou and Dorka after the game, this being their final game as Huskies, but they both played well in this one. Lou was efficient, and it seemed like she was, going out as hard as she could.
Yeah.
Can you speak to how Lou especially, but the both of them, have had an impact on this program?
Well, I told them in the locker room that obviously I know they're disappointed, and obviously when your season comes to an end, unless you've been there, it's hard to really feel what that feels like. But we would have never got this far. We would have never even had the opportunity to play in this game if it wasn't for Dorka and Lou's contributions. And I think they added an awful lot on the court, off the court. Their maturity level was evident throughout the whole season. And it really did carry us a lot of times through all the adversity that we went through. They were two constants, that we knew we could count on. So I'm thrilled for them. I want them to walk out of here with their heads up, because they really did have remarkable senior seasons, and I think a lot of people around the country really found a great appreciation for those two, and I'm happy for them.
Last one for you, Coach. A season full of adversity. Even making it to this point, at some points in the season, felt like maybe you couldn't, just because of everything that had gone on. Do you have any major takeaways from this year and the resilience of your team?
I'm sure, when I have time to reflect on it a little bit later, there will be some sort of satisfaction that you get from having accomplished, something like this. You don't get to be here 29 times, in a row without, players who can perform at this level. So, when I have time, I look back and appreciate it maybe more, but it could be 129 times when it's over. The finality of it is just what hits you the hardest.